Get Rich Education is brought to you by Mid-South Homebuyers, cash flowing turnkey property in Memphis, Tennessee.
Welcome to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold, giving you information and ideas on the investment that has turned more ordinary people into millionaires and billionaires than anything else, and can provide you with more wealth and happiness than you ever thought possible. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, and educator, Keith Weinhold.
Welcome to Get Rich Education, episode 45. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Today, we're going where we haven't gone before. We're talking about the dealing with tenants portion of property management, which I always say should be called tenant management. So the polish, the luster is off the show today. We're getting dirt under our fingernails and dust particulate up our nostrils, okay? It's not going to sound like the prior 44 GRE episodes. This episode serves at least two audiences. Number one is the general real estate investor or turnkey real estate investor that doesn't want to do it themselves, and you're really going to get an appreciation for what your turnkey provider property manager does. And the second audience is, hey, this is episode 2 out of 2 of the Plex show. When I describe interactions with tenants and properties, I'll reference dealing with such in a Plex sometimes, although this could often refer to any size of property. Of course, you could have hybridized interests here too. Maybe you want to own or occupy a Plex in your local market while you're also buying turnkeys out of market. Now, I managed my own local apartment buildings for 5.5 years, which was too long. I shouldn't have done it that long. And it's now been 7 or 8 years since I've managed any property, thank goodness. You know, I always say my mission is to provide tenants with housing that is clean, safe, affordable, and functional. Well, your property manager is usually doing that work for you, and today you'll get a new appreciation for the value that they bring to you, okay? In real estate investing, property managers, aka tenant managers, these people are the unsung heroes. I have such an appreciation for what they do because I understand it from the inside since I've done it. You'll learn how to manage tenants that live in the same fourplex that you reside in here. Check the last episode, number 44. That's part 1 of 2 in why buying a fourplex with just a 3.5% down payment could be your wealth building breakthrough like it was for me. As real estate investors, whether we're turnkey real estate investors or otherwise, we all need to remember that tenants secure your income stream. With no rent-paying tenants, your cash-on-cash return is 0. Your cap rate is 0 too. Actually, your income's 0, and your cash flow is, well, worse than 0. It's going to be negative unless you have rent-paying tenants. Without tenants and rent incomes, you know, there's no snappy little don't follow money, make money follow you saying that I've got going on, okay? So let's not forget who we ultimately serve as real estate investors. Now, I want you to start off your income property purchase with as much cash in your pocket as possible after that purchase is complete, okay? When you buy your investment property, whether it's a fourplex or any other one, try to close near the beginning of the calendar month, but just after the 1st, okay? For example, if you close on May 1st, you'll receive the entire month of May rents at the closing table, and you'll owe your first mortgage payment June 1st. But if you close after the 1st of May, yet early in the month, like May 2nd through 6th or 7th, then you'll still receive most of the May rent income right there at the closing table. Plus, due to the escrow interest calculation cycle, you won't owe your first mortgage payment until July 1st, almost 2 months later, okay? By July 1st, you would have received May rents at the closing table, and you'll get June rents later from your tenants before any mortgage payment is due. That's essentially like getting an extra month of rent income for free. Okay, so in this scenario, you are owner occupying, meaning living in one unit of the apartment building that you own for your financing advantage. After you close and take possession of the rental property, try to structure things so that you live on an upper floor. It's usually going to be less noisy. Well, here we go. Your tenants now become your neighbors, and they're neighbors that you now have an ongoing business relationship with. Yeah, so the good news is that you've got rent-paying tenants, and the bad news is that the previous ownership regime chose those tenants and you didn't. Well, all right, now you might have had a chance to meet those tenants during the building inspection before you went ahead and bought the place, okay? So you can get an idea of your property's tenant profile before you commit to the property, so that way you typically don't go in blind, all right? There's no sort of professional certification you need to have to self-manage your property's tenants. The day you close, you have the job of tenant manager, often with zero prior experience and no trainer to help you, maybe otherwise than what I'm helping you with today. Now, most tenants are good, law-abiding people that pay the rent on time. Please keep that in mind as we move on because, well, you just don't learn the lessons if we just end the show there and say everything ought to be all right, okay? As a landlord on a prior show way back, I told you that the best way to think of your relationship with your tenants is this. Be friendly, not friends. Be friendly, but not friends. All right, what does that mean? That means don't go asking them to go running with you, okay? Now, but if that tenant gets back from going jogging, and they're there on the sidewalk and you see them, be friendly. You can ask them, where they went or, how it went and more. If they ever ask you about coming along to do something, go to a picnic, play tennis, I wouldn't go. When they get back from their picnic and you see them outside the building, be friendly. Ask them how the picnic was, all right? Friends go play tennis together. You usually don't want to do that with your tenant, okay? Because if you go do that, that activity breaks down that transactional barrier, and that tenant starts to think that you understand them better and that you're going to understand that they've got problems and challenges like everyone else. So that tenant might later test you and not pay the rent when it's due. So be friendly, not friends. Now, most tenants don't even realize that you have a mortgage to pay every month as the new building owner / landlord. Yeah, they really don't know that. In one of the early chats that you have with your tenants shortly after you buy the building, when you introduce yourself as the new property owner, just kind of make a little joke about yourself during the discussion like, oh yeah, I don't know what I've gotten myself into now, seeing if I can make a mortgage payment on an entire building, okay? If you do that, you've let them know in a subtle way early on that you don't just take their $1,000 or whatever it is of monthly rent income as straight profit for yourself, okay? The tenant's going to remember that. This is kind of sad, but some of your tenants are going to try to test you, especially maybe if you're young looking and they're just not going to pay the rent to you intentionally when that due date on the first of the month rolls around. But now if you gave them that mortgage line early on, it can reduce the chances of this happening. But some tenants might be living paycheck to paycheck and they're one car repair or one medical bill from missing the rent, all right? Well, here's what you do when a tenant is late with the rent. Have zero tolerance for it. All right? Yeah. Landlord-tenant laws vary significantly by state in the United States, but when a tenant violates the lease agreement, in some of the more common ways, number one is paying late rent. Number two is probably letting more people live there than what are named on the lease. And the third one is probably letting a pet reside there if you don't allow pets. Have no tolerance for that kind of behavior, okay? Once you've identified the problem, talk to the tenant about the problem first, if that's at all feasible, okay? Don't just idly accept their excuses like things like, oh, well, we'll have the rent to you by next week, and, that's when I get paid again, or some nonsense like this. Because, look, if you accept that, you've just let them know that it's okay to pay the rent late once, and they're going to pay the rent late again, and it's eventually just going to wear you out, okay? If the rent is late, serve them with a written notice of violation, all right? A notice of violation. You can download this from your state's Landlord and Tenant Act site, okay? That might be known as a notice to quit in Pennsylvania and some other states. That notice outlines exactly what part of the lease the tenant's in violation of, whether they're still active under the prior owner's lease or whether that's under your new lease, okay? Well, you want to complete that notice document in full, all right? I've been in eviction court a few times trying to evict tenants, and I've seen judges dismiss totally valid cases just because you didn't have a couple blanks filled out on the notice of violation form to the tenant, okay? And the amount of leniency from a judge on that's going to depend on what state you're in too, okay? Well, when you serve notice to that tenant, whether you hand that document to them personally, send it certified mail, tape it onto their apartment door, whenever you see that tenant after serving them that notice and they ask, what this is all about, or they might even want to complain to you, or they might even want to yell at you, or they might even want to swear at you. Remember, this can be really uncomfortable if you live there in the fourplex with them. This feels confrontational. You might run into this tenant just during the course of day-to-day life, all right? Whatever you do, don't lower yourself to the tenant's level and yell back. You don't have to, because you've already done some reading about your state's Landlord and Tenant Act, okay? You should do that before you post the notice. When your tenant asks about the notice you served them, or they want some sort of answer from you, there's one powerful, really short sentence that I want you to say to them, okay? With a calm confidence, your line to the tenant about posting that notice is simply this: the law says that I have to. The more that you say after you give that line, you're usually just going to weaken your position, okay? Those powerful words that you just used to that tenant, the law says that I have to. Oh, that just demonstrated so much. I learned that line is so effective through my own trial and error, okay? The law says that I have to. That shows that it's not adversarial between you and the tenant. It kind of says, I don't have a problem with you, the tenant. I'm just reverting to the common law between us. The problem isn't you. The problem is conforming to the law. That line also demonstrates that you know the law and that they better act to remedy it, because that's what's outlined in the notice of violation that you just served them. That is one powerful line of just, 7 words, and it helps reiterate the business relationship between you and the tenant. It motivates them to pay. Again, the law says that I have to. Look at what we've done to the tenant's psychology by now, okay? Can you see why I want you to, almost joke around in one of your first ever chats with them, kind of in a self-deprecating way where you've casually let them know that you have a mortgage to pay? All right, you can probably see why I advocate a long-term stance of be friendly, not friends. All right, because you wouldn't feel comfortable serving a friend with a legal notice now, would you? Okay? Friends wouldn't do that. Hey, I've got another great strategy for you here, all right? In my first fourplex, I had a tenant that I had inherited from the prior owner. He lived by himself in unit number 4. He told me he was going to be a week late with the rent because, I forget, it was his aunt or his mother that had died. Well, I was still feeling my way around as a brand new landlord, so I just accepted his story and waited a week, and I still didn't get the rent. Well, when I asked him about it a week later, he showed me the little folder, like the church program paper outlining his relative's death. basically proving to me that it was real and not made up. And, that got me feeling all soft and forgiving. So the tenant kept kicking the can down the road. I mean, it was weeks later, and the tenant still wouldn't leave despite me asking him to leave by that time. And I eventually had to evict him. I just couldn't keep endlessly going on like that. After a while, I'm like, come on, dude, you're wearing me out, both emotionally and financially. So, hey, there can be times where you don't feel so good about dealing with tenants in your building. You might even say, I hate real estate investing at this point. My emotions for feeling bad about my tenant's family loss got in the way, and I lost out on rent income, and yet he still had to be removed in the end anyway. So, don't draw it out. Just nip things like that in the bud, okay? Now, here's something you can do to kind of further separate the emotions from business. If you are so lucky as to have a friend that also wants to own a fourplex in the same town as you can manage each other's buildings, okay? Yes. So your friend, he or she manages your building's tenants and rent collections, and you do the same for the friend. And a lot of times, tenants have an easier time respecting a business relationship with a person that is not also a neighbor. And now you feel more comfortable about living around and running into the tenants of your owner-occupied fourplex because you have this blanket of separation between the two of you, okay? It's going to be a lot easier for you to serve notices of violation to tenants over at the friend's building because you won't be running into them. You're just not so emotionally attached, okay? So this way your dealings are more of a transaction, and it's easy for them to be less of an emotion, all right? When you have a nasty, uncomfortable breakup with a tenant and they move out, I guess one good thing that I can say is it seems like maybe that tenant's going to come back and retaliate somehow after they're gone, but I've never seen a tenant come back to the building and, start smashing windows or something like that out of retaliation. Okay, once they're gone, they're just gone. But like I said, most tenants are good people, so be responsive to your tenants' needs. Fix their window that won't open. Make sure their sliding closet doors work. Replace the faulty heating element in their stove, okay? Being a landlord is work. Some tenants are going to over-communicate with you, and they're just kind of be more dainty, and they're going to want you to adjust and readjust their kitchen cabinet doors if they're just a little bit loose. And some tenants could under-communicate with you, which could be worse. They might not tell you about a toilet that's running too long or a leaky faucet that you actually do want to know about because it's damaging the subflooring and it's running up your water bill, okay? When you're attentive to needs, you're serving others well, and you're also making the tenant feel like you're doing something to earn the rent that they're paying, okay? So when that tenant pays the rent to you, they like to know that they feel it's going towards something that they've been able to see that's tangible, like you've improved their apartment and their life. It's important that, you don't have to know how to fix much of anything, really. It does help, but I am an awful handyman. When I started off owning my own fourplex, living in one unit and renting out the other three myself, I often had to not only call out for help with plumbing and electrical, but basic handyman stuff that I do not have a good ability for. Not even an average ability for it, okay? Fixing stuff is just not my gig. But I do make sure that things get fixed. They just don't get fixed by me. You know what? I actually started off with awful luck. The first full day that I owned my fourplex, okay? Closed one day, it recorded the next day, and then the following day, I got a call from Beth in unit number 1. She asked me if I was even calling the right person. I hadn't even met my new tenant, Beth, yet. Her water heater was leaking water on the floor, and it was soaking out into the living room carpet, okay? Now, gosh, I was still trying to get my head around the fact that I owned this fourplex, and I hadn't even moved my stuff into my unit number 3 yet. Well, I checked out Beth's problem, and I had no idea how to fix a leaking water heater or how to even stop the leak. Being very young and new, I was pretty stressed out about this, okay? I phoned a plumbing company. Of course, it was on a Saturday, so I had to pay the plumbing company's overtime rates as it worked out. But you know what? I had that plumbing company do it professionally and promptly. And, I paid a little extra for it overtime rather than instead trying to ask Beth and her family to wait a couple days and shower at a friend's house until Monday when I could pay the regular rates. Okay. I just paid for it and got it handled. That unexpected water heater expense right after cutting my, $12,000 check at the closing table a few days earlier, that was not a great way to start my fourplex ownership. I thought, my gosh, I'm so unlucky. But over time, you know what that ended up doing for me? I had no idea, but spending that $1,200 or whatever it was on Best water heater, that ended up being like this investment in goodwill. Beth could tell that her building's new owner cared about providing housing that is clean, safe, affordable, and functional. Yeah, Beth let the other tenants know as well how I handled her situation. So that turned out to be really all of my fourplex tenants' first impression of me. And Beth ended up living there 5 more years, okay? In any case, your inherited tenants, the ones that you got from the previous owner, they're going to start moving out at some point, and you're going to begin screening new tenants. All right, so what do you look for? You've got to look for a monthly income 3 times the rent amount. Do a credit check, court search, employment history, landlord history. There are a ton of resources online to help you do this. Evictions don't show up in a credit report unless there was a judgment, so you're using your state's court search system to look for any prior evictions, okay? And evictions are also known as forcible detainers in a lot of states, all right? Get the tenant's correct social security number in order to perform all this. And you're also going to want that number in case you need to evict or get a creditor judgment against the tenant down the road, okay? You need that social security number. Don't get a referral from their current landlord. Don't get a referral from the place that they're trying to move out of, all right? It's sad to say, and I've had it happen before, current landlords might lie to you. They'll want to offload a bad tenant onto you. They might say all kinds of things about this tenant just to get rid of them, all right? So you want to talk to the prior landlords of that tenant. So that way you're talking with someone that has no incentive to offload a bad tenant onto you, all right? Because they don't live there anymore. If all that seems like too much for you to deal with, look, you can still self-manage your owner-occupied fourplex or whatever building that might be, and you can hire a management company just for the portion where they screen and place tenants for you, and they'll just charge you a smaller leasing fee rather than the full management fee whenever you have a vacancy. All right? So that's an option for you. With new tenants, offer them a small rent discount if they set up rent auto pay from their bank account directly to yours, okay? Now, some tenants might be reluctant to do this, and that could be an indicator that they're a paycheck-to-paycheck tenant. You might not want to disqualify them only based on their reluctance to do that. It's just one more thing to consider when you're sizing up a prospective tenant, okay? You can find a lot of sample leases, like rental contracts that your tenant signs, but make sure your language is in accordance with laws and regulations, okay? One great thing to add to your lease contract is that when a tenant is living there and they give you notice to leave, have it in the contract that you can exhibit that unit to prospective new tenants while the existing one still lives there, okay? Instead of having to wait until the unit is vacant to show the property. That way you can reduce your vacancy because few things kill cash flow like vacancy and turnover. If you have tenants that want to look at one of your vacant apartment units, but you can't be physically present to show it to them every time, and you can get kind of a good sense for a tenant's character over the phone, if you feel confident in that, use a lockbox on the door and give the tenant the combination so they can let themselves in to take a look. That way you didn't have to be there every time. Now, as far as sizing up a tenant when you're physically there and showing a prospect the property, don't hide any defects, okay? They're going to respect you more if you actually go out of your way to point out any defects with the property that they would not notice on a walkthrough. Because they're going to find out anyway when they move in, all right? When you're trying to get to know your prospective tenant as they're looking at your vacant apartment, boy, gosh, I hate to say it, but some tenants are going to lie to you too, okay? I mean, like, we have a cat, but it's declawed. The translation is the cat had its nails trimmed once 2 years ago. No, we don't smoke. Translation is we do smoke and we sprayed our shirts with Febreze, okay? We have a dog, but it's only 15 pounds. Translation, the dog is 115 pounds, okay? Dealing with some tenants can make you lose faith in humanity. They just aren't as, I guess, aspirational as a GRE listener like you, okay? Some of them just don't have their act together. I don't know how else to say it. You know, sometimes there's just a reason that they're renters and they're not cut out to be homeowners. All right, so after you've introduced the tenants to the apartment you're trying to rent and you felt out that tenant a little bit, here's what I want you to do. Leave those prospective tenants inside the unit by themselves for a few more minutes so they can discuss the place between themselves. While they're inside doing that, here's what you do. Go outside. Walk out of the building into the parking lot or onto the street and find their car. All right, get up close to their car and look inside their car. The way that they keep their car is often the way that they're going to keep your apartment. I mean, are there heaps of clothing all over the seats? Are there fast food wrappers strewn all around? I mean, not that necessarily disqualifies them, all right? I mean, we're just getting into your judgment area here, all right? You're trying to sum up the whole picture, okay? Did the tenant just tell you that they don't have any pets or that they don't smoke and you see dog hair all over the car or even a pet in the car, all right? A few minutes ago inside the vacant apartment, I mean, did they tell you that they don't smoke and there's cigarette butts in the car ashtray? So, I mean, this can tell you a lot, all right? It's not so practical to go see where they live now and how they live now, so their car can tell you a lot, all right? Now, I never went inside someone's car. I think that's a little weird, but, you know, don't feel too strange about just looking inside a prospective tenant's car, okay? Because they actually are inside a vacant apartment that you own right now, all right? The condition of their car itself surely tells you something. I mean, the actual car, not just the stuff in it, okay? If their car is a 1992 Plymouth Duster and the muffler is hanging on with only a bungee cord and binder clips, they might have trouble paying the rent by the due date every month, okay? Your tenants, you know, they might not have what you have or dress quite like you do, and those necessarily aren't reasons to disqualify them. I mean, if you think they look a little off by, I don't know, say they're wearing an old faded NBA logo shirt of your least favorite team and it's tucked into a pair of tight Wrangler jeans. Okay, well, despite how that looks, that actually might be just perfect, okay? You're not looking for friends. You're looking for responsible tenants that are hopefully going to be quiet and respectful, okay? If their credit's good and their tenant, employment, and criminal history is pretty clean, that's what matters more, okay? If a tenant had a big unexpected medical bill that they were late payers on 2 years ago, you might even accept that based on the circumstances and based on, you know, how hot your rental market is and what type of tenants you might have competing for that property, okay? A lot of my best tenants in no-frills apartments are like a young military guy or maybe a supermarket deli manager, all right? Both of those are jobs that kind of take a person that has their act together to a certain extent, but yet it doesn't pay really well. I mean, as much as I respect what those people do. All right, but first impressions are big and, you know, you're not seeking fashion mavens here, all right? I mean, dressing well helps, an attempt helps, okay, but you know, a female just might not be coming in with the latest Lululemon gear, all right? You don't need fashionistas at your place, all right? It doesn't matter. The durability of your property's income stream is in no way threatened because the father of one of your tenant families is wearing an old pair of hip hugger Wranglers, okay? I mean, that income stream could still be all right. I mean, a dude could work at a warehouse all day. I mean, he might just have different sensibilities than you, all right? To him, if he's going to dinner at a nice white tablecloth steakhouse for a special occasion tonight, he might find it perfectly normal to wear his Philadelphia Eagles jersey there, okay? That could still be a good tenant in your fourplex, okay? You're not looking for a magna cum laude master's degree grad or better here, all right? The degree to which a man's unusually tight denim jeans are clinging onto his buttocks and calves is not an imminent threat to the durability of your property's income stream, okay? Hey, sometimes you have to laugh a little bit to keep from crying when you're dealing with tenants, all right? You're not looking for friends. You want qualified tenants, preferably ones that you have no relationship with outside your building. All right, I'm going to change it up for a minute here before I talk about more street-level landlording techniques. You know, I was reading earlier that Forbes has rated Memphis, Tennessee as the #1 cash flowing market in the world. Yes, that's #1 in the world by Forbes. Our good friends at Mid-South Homebuyers have been Memphis's premier turnkey provider for 14 years. So that's the #1 provider in the #1 market. Mid-South has a stellar reputation, and the Better Business Bureau gave them an A+ rating. And with the content of today's show, you may be more interested in a turnkey provider than ever before, so that you never have to manage property. Mid-South Homebuyers and their owner, Terry Kerr, renovate homes, then place tenants, and then sell it to you, and sell it to you with your management covered from day one. That's what turnkey real estate investing is. Find out what their many repeat buyers and GRE listeners already know. Their houses are completely renovated with a 1-year builder's warranty and a lifelong rental guarantee. They're really a perfect fit for the first-time out-of-state investor or the seasoned investor diversifying their portfolio. Mid-South Homebuyers' friendly staff makes investing really easy. Check them out at midsouthhomebuyers.com. or give them a call at 901-217-HOME. That's 901-217-HOME.
This is Rich Dad Advisor Ken McElroy. Listen to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold and don't quit your daydream.
I mentioned in an early GRE episode that one of the biggest mistakes I made when renting out a unit in an owner-occupied fourplex was when I was in a hurry to fill a vacancy and I rented to 3 girls. And the reason that I rented to them is because they were attractive. That's it. And they were moving right into the unit directly next to me. Now, it's often tempting to get a vacant unit filled because it solves 2 short-term problems for you at once, okay? It fills the nagging little job that you have to continually do by advertising and screening tenant after tenant in order to get that vacancy filled. And secondly, it puts that first month's rent and security deposit into your pocket. So short term, it just gave you money and time when you get a vacancy filled quickly. You know, in this case, I thought, my gosh, if I also have the advantage of 3 attractive girls living this close to me, it wouldn't matter if their credit score is 150 if I get to regularly see them. Well, this just ended up being another story of a guy acting dumb in the presence of attractive women, okay? This was shortly before I met the woman that would eventually become my wife. Pets weren't allowed, and the 3 girls tried to hide the fact that they were keeping a big dog there. Yes, even though they lived in the unit right next to me. I mean, how dumb is that? They threw such big parties that the police showed up twice, and I was not getting invited to any of their parties, okay? So I got into this problem because I didn't screen properly. When a new tenant moves in, have them complete a room condition form, or you can video the premises with them so that down the road at move out, you can make any appropriate deductions from the security deposit, all right? Now, one strategy that I've heard some landlords employ, but I've never done this, I don't know, it just seems mildly manipulative to me, is that while your tenant is physically moving in, I mean, envision them with an armload of stuff, you know, carrying a box up the stairs, you kind of interrupt them and you get them to sign a longer 2-year lease to supersede the 1-year lease. All right. The thought behind that is when a tenant is moving, they are reminded of how awful that uprooting moving experience is. And in that moment, it will seem totally logical for them to sign on for 2 years because they think they won't want to go through that trauma of moving again just 1 year later. When you're operating a fourplex building, some of that size, you might go for an entire month without having really much of any issue to deal with. There'll still be some ongoing stuff happening, but like no issue. But then, suddenly something will come up where there's a reason and you're going to have to go to Home Depot 4 times in 3 days. About twice per year, you'll want to post notice that you're doing inspections on the inside of the tenant's units to make sure that there isn't some sort of deferred maintenance thing cropping up, like a water leak or some other condition that could be harming your building. You just can't rely on tenants to tell you about those things. Don't forget that if your fourplex has a common area like hallways, stairways, and a laundry room, that you're going to need to see that that area gets cleaned regularly. One of your tenants might want to do that for a rent discount. While you're still living there, though, do that yourself because you're going to get to see the tenant comings and goings and kind of find out what's going on in your building. All right, now, as a few people are listening to this, they might wonder, so Keith, with all your landlording knowledge and experience, why don't you manage your own properties, at least the ones in your local market? I don't manage any properties. And I think longtime listeners know the answer is because my ROTI, my favorite investor metric, my return on time invested, would be too low to do that activity, all right? Property management is a profession that pays maybe $20, $30 an hour. I mean, being a full-time real estate investor pays maybe $50 an hour up to really $5,000 plus an hour. Effectively subcontracting out my time to property managers in various markets, that frees up my time for more profitable ventures or, just more time for fun in life. It also attracts friends that think the same way I do, and that's going to attract friends that think the same way you do. And, I'll call it that way you get the benefit of collaborative synergies when you're working at a higher level than if you sought that collaboration at the lower management level. Here's what I mean. In fact, look at GRE's John Collins, my best friend. Although he lives on one side of a very nice new construction duplex with garages in Midtown Anchorage, he pays a property manager to manage the very other side of the same new duplex that he lives in because John doesn't want lower use manager duties to occupy any portion of his mental bandwidth, okay? That's how high achievers think and act. That's how you have time to grow. Life is too short for property management, okay? Being a landlord is work, work, work. Repainting vacated units, resetting toilet seals, having appliances repaired, and making another run to Lowe's or Home Depot, okay? So, today these kind of street level tactics, they're not magic formulas that work every time, all right? It just increases your chances. So if you listen to the prior episode, episode 44, and now this episode about fourplexes, and you're just kind of thinking that, you have like 7 out of the 8 indicators that an owner-occupied fourplex could be a wealth builder for you in the home market that you reside in, that would be great if you go ahead and prosper. Some markets just don't have fourplexes where you can safely owner-occupy one and find a respectful demographic, all right? Your safety is pretty important. Some investors have told me that Las Vegas and Houston are 2 markets where you cannot seem to find this with fourplexes, all right? So again, like I said at last episode, rely on a good property manager for guidance and understand the risks, okay? More often than not, you will prosper. Real estate is a forgiving investment class because you're paid in so many ways, all right? So I have walked a mile in those landlording shoes. Turnkey is a better place to be. but it helps to know what goes into securing properties' income streams at the lowest level, okay? In fact, before we go, I want you to do something right now. Wherever you're listening from, look at the Get Rich Education logo on whatever device you're listening from. Go look on your iPhone or your Samsung or whatever. I'll give you a second. Look at that logo. Okay, you're looking at the GRE tree, the money tree. All right, we've spent plenty of episodes discussing the trunk, the branches, and the dollar bill green leaves on that money tree, okay? Now look down below the base of the trunk. That's where the roots are. And the roots are often gnarled and gritty and a little bit maybe even ugly to look at and deal with. They're covered with caked on dirt. Well, they're the tenants and the property managers. They're the nutrients, the soil, the plant litter, the fertilizer that allows us as investors that great privilege to pick those green dollar bill leaves on the tree. So yes, you can be a terrific profiteer as a real estate investor, but don't forget what we ultimately do. Look down below at the base of that tree. We provide good housing to a lot of good people, okay? You can stop looking at the logo now, but just remember that somebody's daughter is out there right now playing a season of Little League Baseball. That daughter sleeps in housing that you will now own and control, okay? At the end of the baseball season, that girl might get a trophy that she places on a mantle in your property's living room. That girl feels safe there. This is a family's home, and you have both the privilege and the responsibility of providing it. So do a good job. Over the long run, that stance is not going to hurt your profits anyway. It's going to help it. I describe how 25 to 30% rates of return annually are common in leveraged, cash flowing, buy and hold real estate. And I do that in episode 31, okay? Episode 31. So there's plenty of profit in this. You know why I landlorded 5.5 years instead of a shorter time period? Because when I asked more seasoned landlords about hiring professional property management to get away from all this messiness and occasional upheaval in my life as a property manager, a lot of those more seasoned people, they would keep using this same old line. Oh no one will take better care of your property than you. You've got to manage it yourself. Well, I went to find my own truth on that. Later I started attending national and international real estate investing seminars, and no, I think I got above that. I learned that landlording is not where the money is. Being the best investor that you can is. All those seasoned self-managers back in my local area, they couldn't scale very big by doing everything themselves. And, more importantly, some of those people were and still are living lives almost centered on running around at their properties with some, ratty old pickup truck with a ladder and all these little paint cans on it, all right? So, they rarely, if ever, went on expansionary vacations or to some great event. I actually agree with them that no one will take better care of your property than you. But even more importantly is that I'm not going to take all that time and upheaval and time away from my family and those I love to self-manage just to get that last 5% of landlording perfection, okay? I just want to be sure my manager's doing a good job. You can be a successful real estate investor without ever managing any tenants yourself. If one wants to self-manage, there are lessons that you can and will learn, but after just 1 or 2 years of self-management, you've already learned most of them. After 1 or 2 years, focus on finding a good manager. And I'll tell you, I wish I could have listened to this episode before I bought my first ever fourplex back in 2002. But even better than that, maybe, is that I got to live it myself and then help you. So, hey, share this series of 2 shows, Get Rich Education episodes 44 and 45, with a younger person, and you could really change the trajectory of their life. At last check, you only need to be 18 years old to qualify for an FHA loan with 3.5% down on a fourplex. And, in certain situations, owner occupying a fourplex could be right for a 19-year-old, I'll say emotionally mature girl or guy, or a lot of other various aspirational people, or, even though it's less likely but possible, maybe even an older couple. My name is Keith Weinhold, and I am an international real estate investor based in the United States that gets a lot of enjoyment out of helping people just like you. You can learn more about me on episode 21. I'm here to help you build your wealth through education, actionable content, inspiration, motivation, tactics, strategy, perspective through Get Rich Education, and we have listeners in 136 countries. If you want more of this type of material, you can do so in two ways. They're both free. Number one, join me here every week at iTunes, iHeartRadio, or the Android app. The second way is by subscribing to our free newsletter at GetRichEducation.com. Many listeners do both. Our newsletter is where you can find turnkey real estate investing opportunities in investor-advantaged U.S. markets that are not available to the public. Again, go to GetRichEducation.com to sign up for that right now. I'm glad to have you here, but you weren't here for me, you were here for you. I'll see you next week. Now go out there and don't quit your daydream.
You've been listening to Get Rich Education, telling you what the wealthy won't tell you about real estate and investing. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to visit iTunes and leave your comments.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.